Around the World in 80 Days, 2.
5 minutes before the train left, Passepartout came rushing into the train station without his shoes on. Detective Fix heard him explain how he had been attacked by priests at a temple. Unknowingly, Passepartout had broken the law by entering a temple with his shoes on. Fix left the station to arrange for Passepartout's arrest in Calcutta, which was their next destination. He thought this would keep them in India until the warrant for Mr. Fogg arrived. Phileas Fogg and Passepartout were now moving across India at full speed on a train. The train came to a sudden stop on the morning of their third day. The railway track had not been completed between this village and the next. Passengers had to find their own transport. Mr. Fogg was not worried because he was ahead of schedule by 2 days. Passepartout solved the problem by finding them a guide and an elephant to use as transport. Their young guide said they would gain 20 miles by going directly through the forest. They spent the night in a ruined hut, lighting a fire to keep warm. They were traveling smoothly the next day when the elephant suddenly stopped. The guide went to investigate. He soon returned and told them that a big group of people were coming toward them. "It would be dangerous for us to be seen," he said. They headed into the forest to hide. The procession of colorfully dressed people was for a funeral. The dead man being carried was an old prince, and the young woman walking in front was his wife. The young princess would be sacrificed as part of the ceremony. Usually, the wife chooses to be a sacrifice, but their guide said the young princess had been drugged and was being forced to go. Mr. Fogg surprised everyone when he suggested they save the young princess. They followed the group to the nearby temple. That night, while the crowd of people slept, Mr. Fogg's group tried to make a hole in the temple wall. The guards heard them, so they had to quickly escape back into the forest. They had failed in their attempt to rescue the princess, so they spent the night near the temple. The next morning, Mr. Fogg's group watched helplessly as the funeral started. The young princess was laid on a big pile of wood next to her dead husband. The wood had just been set on fire when the body of the dead prince suddenly rose up. He picked up the young woman and climbed down. Immediately the crowd of people got on their knees, their heads bowed. The man came toward Mr. Fogg and said, "Let's go." It was Passepartout. Passepartout must have sneaked up there during the night. Mr. Fogg's group quickly disappeared into the forest. The crowd of people realized what had happened and ran after them, but the elephant was fast, and they were soon far away. Mr. Fogg's group arrived at the station in Allahabad around 10 o'clock. The train from Allahabad would get them to Calcutta in less than 24 hours. Phileas Fogg would be able to take the steamer to Hong Kong. When the princess recovered her senses, she was astonished to find herself on a train. She was very grateful for everything they had done. Mr. Fogg decided that the young princess, whose name was Aouda, would travel with them as far as Hong Kong. It would no longer be safe for her in India. Aouda had a relative who lived in Hong Kong, so Mr. Fogg's plan was perfect. By the time Mr. Fogg reached Calcutta, he was neither behind nor ahead of schedule. Some policemen were waiting to arrest Passepartout for the crime he had committed in Bombay. A master is responsible for his servant's actions, so Mr. Fogg was also arrested. After agreeing to the charges of the crime, Mr. Fogg paid bail and then went straight to the harbor. There, Mr. Fogg and the others boarded the steamer that was bound for Hong Kong. Detective Fix, who was already in Calcutta, was furious. Mr. Fogg had escaped again. Fix managed to board the same steamer without being seen. After reaching Hong Kong, Mr. Fogg found out that Aouda's relative had moved to Holland. He decided that she would continue to travel with them to Europe. Meanwhile, Fix wanted to delay Mr. Fogg's departure until the warrant arrived. Hong Kong would be the last British colony in Mr. Fogg's journey before he returned to England.